Rejection sensitivity dysphoria, what is it and how does it impact how we give feedback as managers? Does it impact? Is it something we even need to worry about? Hello, my name is Jenefer. I'm the founder of Silk Helix and we are a HR consultancy that provides businesses with all things HR, employment, law advice and specialise in neurodiversity support. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria is something that you may have heard talked about. There's a lot of talk about it, particularly on social media, particularly in the relation to ADHD. It was a term coined by Dr. William Dodson, and he said that it was an extreme feeling or emotion that comes from a feeling of having been rejected or criticised, and it's related particularly to ADHD. His claim was it had nothing to do with trauma and it was purely an ADHD thing only experienced by people with ADHD. Now, I've tried to do some research into this and can't actually find any sort of scientific backing for this or anything that outlines it as a specific condition. In fact, the only sort of specialist articles I can find are in Attitude magazine. There's two in there and they link into each other. So they don't link back to any kind of articles or anything from Dr. William Dodson. So please comment below if you found something, if you've seen something that goes beyond that, please let me know because I'd really like to read it. But what I would say is whilst there are some doubts around rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it's not listed in the DSM as a specific condition, there is absolutely no doubt that rejection sensitivity is a thing. Ever since I've been training managers, we've known that the feedback sandwich, often known by another name, where you do kind of sort of positive, negative, positive, which was recommended really strongly in the 80s, I think the 80s, 90s, to managers as a way to give feedback. And one of the really big problems with that is people who are very rejection sensitive will hear that negative bit and not hear the positives on either side. It doesn't matter how strong those positives are, how big those positives are in comparison to those negatives, they will not take them in. So we know that rejection sensitivity is a thing and there is absolutely no doubt in that. There's also absolutely no doubt in that it has relationships with neurodiversity. I don't think it's just ADHD, and I've heard people talking who don't have ADHD or an ADHD diagnosis who also say that they've experienced it. I've heard therapists talk about it in relationship to trauma and children, now adults, where they've grown up in childhoods of emotional neglect or emotional abuse, where rejection can be sort of really strongly felt. And this does have a really big impact on us as managers. So why do we need to worry about it? We need to worry about it because it impacts people's motivation. It impacts how productive people are at work, and it impacts how we can get people to accept and receive negative as well as positive feedback. So if we're giving somebody some constructive feedback to say, look, love how you've done that report, but in future, actually, we need it in a slightly different way. And somebody takes that to be a really intense rejection of themselves. So instead of just hearing, oh, I could have done that report slightly differently, they hear an entire rejection of themselves as an individual. That's going to be really demotivating. Potentially it's going to lead them to go off sick, to feel shame, fear, embarrassment about coming to work, about putting forward their ideas. It's going to reduce their confidence. And all of these things have major impacts on somebody's performance at work. Equally, we can't go the other way and just go, oh yeah, you're wonderful, all great, everything's wonderful all the time, because then we don't grow, we don't learn. We need that feedback. We grow from that. We learn how to do things the way that our boss, the company, needs us to do it when we get that feedback. So it's really important that we take this into account, but we don't let it stop us giving feedback, but we do think about it in how we give feedback so that we can best motivate people. So what can we do to support people who are experiencing rejection sensitivity? Firstly, make sure that we have plenty of positives in there. A lot of these people are confidence players, so they will do well when they're feeling confident. They also need to be reminded when they're doing well. They'll often doubt themselves and be highly critical upon themselves and often highly aware of their own faults. So needing that boost of confidence, that push to say, yeah, you are doing a good job, so that they're not doubting themselves. Now, I mentioned earlier the feedback sandwich. I don't think that should be sandwiched in a conversation. I don't think we should be going to conversation going positive, negative, positive. I don't think it works. I don't think it helps. As I say, people will come out either having heard just the negative or just the positive, or it all just gets a bit confusing and you're not really sure what to say. What we're talking about is making sure that in the overall, we've got a situation where there's kind of more positive than negative. So people are regularly hearing positives, thank yous, well done, yeah, you've done a great job, that's a great contribution, all of those things. And then when the negatives come, they're balanced within that wider context of hearing the positives. I think that's really important, and I think it's something that as managers we really need to think about. And sometimes there is an attitude of, I don't want to sort of give people a big head or things like that, and that's not what happens in most situations. It's also important that we be really specific in our feedback. So we're making sure that somebody is aware that when we're saying, that report, let's take a really simple one. That report needed an extra heading here. We're not saying, you're stupid, you can't write reports, you're incapable. We're just saying, I think there's a heading here that could have been here, would have made it easier for the reader to see. So what I'm doing is I'm being very specific about what it is that's needed, why it's needed, why it would be beneficial, and therefore the individual knows exactly what to take away for the next time they do that report, the next time they do any activity. I've got some other videos on the AID model of giving feedback. I do recommend check them out because I go into more detail about how we can use the AID model to give really specific feedback. I also mentioned in those videos, it's really important when we use that model that we don't deliver a lecture. When we deliver a lecture, somebody takes away a feeling of disempowerment, a feeling of, they believed I didn't know that or I couldn't have done better. Whereas what we can do is coach people. So we can give people the opportunity to reflect, give their own feedback. Very often people know where things could have been better. They know what they could have done if they had a bit more time, a bit more resources, or perhaps just looking back to say, with hindsight, that would have looked better with this. Or we point something out to them and then they can reflect on that and then think for themselves, so if next time I do this, that might be more useful. So it's really important that we engage people, again, so that we're not just delivering this lecture that enables somebody to walk away from the situation just feeling really disempowered and really criticised. It's also really important that we don't soften feedback, and particularly critical feedback, so much by trying to use metaphors or woolly language. And this can again be really common, particularly if we're conflict avoidant as managers. We don't want to be direct with someone. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We might try and be a little bit subtle. We might try and kind of disguise it as something. And the problem with that, particularly for some with neurodivergent conditions, they may not see the nuance of the conversation. Direct communication is always going to be more beneficial so that we make sure there's no misunderstandings. Nobody has walked away from the situation not knowing what has happened or what is happening or what's expected of them in the future. So there's some key tips with giving feedback. It's just about making sure that we're really clear, we're really specific, that we're making sure that we're giving positive as well as negative feedback, but not trying to sandwich it in one conversation, that this is an overall picture of our management, and that we're being direct with people. But most importantly, make sure you know the individuals you're working with. What works for one person may not work for somebody else. It's really important that we know people as individuals so that we can give the feedback in the way that they best receive it. And that's both positive and negative. So we make sure that they actually hear the feedback that we are trying to give to them. Check out my free guide on managing performance, which goes into this in a little bit more detail. Details are on the screen now as to how you can get that. And if you want me to come into your business, talk to your management team about being neuro-inclusive managers, how we can give feedback, set expectations in a way that really benefits and supports our neurodivergent team members, then get in touch. The details are in the description below as to how to do that. In the meantime, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. They come out every week.